Background history of agrarian reforms.
16th to 19th century land ownership system and President Fidel V. Ramos 1992 to 1998.
Land ownership under Americans and President Joseph E. Estrada 1998 to 2000.
Agrarian reform after World War II and President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo 2000 to 2010.
President Macapagal Agrarian Reform and President Benigno Aquino III 2010 to 2016.
President Marcos Agrarian Reform and President Rodrigo Roa Duterte 2016 to present.
President Corazon C. Aquino 1986 to 1992.
Live from the core tree city of the island, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. This is One News Center. Your time, your news.
Background history of agrarian reforms. Let us define what is agrarian reform. Philippines remains an agricultural country. Agriculture is the main source of livelihood of the Filipinos. In so many years, the agrarian system of Philippines was being controlled by the large landlords. The small farmers in the Philippines were struggling for their rights to land and other natural resources. In conclusion, agrarian reforms means is the distribution of lands regardless of crops and fruits produced to farmers and regular farm workers who are landless, irrespective of tenurial arrangement, to include the totality of factors and support services designed to lift the economic status of the beneficiaries and all others. Meanwhile, let us learn the history of agrarian reform. On 16th to 19th century land ownership system, dispersed communities were organized into pueblo agriculture. King of Spain owned the land, Filipinos paid tributes. Law of the Indies awarded tracts of land to, first, religious orders, second, encomenderos, lastly, departamiento.
16th to 19th century land ownership system, President Fidel V. Ramos 1992 to 1998. Here is Graciano to give us the details.
During 16th to 19th century of agrarian reform history land ownership system, a lot has been changed, done, and implemented to the Philippines. There were communities that were turned into pueblo agriculture, such as native rural communities. And each Christianized native families were given 4 to 5 hectares of land to cultivate. King of Spain owned the lands because they have the power to do so. And Filipinos paid tributes as a sign of Filipino loyalty to the King of Spain. There were also law of Indies that were awarded tracts of land to religious orders, encomenderos, and repartamiento. These law of Indies are determined where settlements should be established and how structures should be built. Encomenderos is a legal system by which Spanish crown attempted to define the status of indigenous people, while repartamiento is a system where the Spanish crown allowed colonists to recruit indigenous people for labor. A new form of ownership was also developed in 19th century, called hacienda system. It is a form of giving protection and education among natives in exchange for land works. Just like what we see when we are in provinces, we see land of hectares and there were people who work for it. They are working to preserve and maintain its natural resources. And in 1860s, landholders were required to register land holdings, but lands that was claimed and registered in other people's names forced peasants or poor farmers out of the land. And lastly, land ownership system of Philippines during 16th to 19th century was the primary reason of Philippine revolts. The public had lost faith when President Fidel V. Ramos took office and entered power in 1992. Fairer, faster, and more meaningful implementation of agrarian reform program was his administration pledged. The following laws were signed into law by President Fidel V. Ramos. Republic Act Number 7881, 1995 amended certain provisions of Republic Act Number 6657 and exempted fish ponds and prawns from the coverage of CARP or CARP. Republic Act Number 8532, 1998, Agrarian Reform Bill, provided an additional 50 billion pesos for CARP or CARP and extended its implementation for another 10 years. This is Iana Garciano. Back to you, Hamad.
Thank you, Ayana. Land ownership under Americans and President Joseph E. Estrada. Here is Mr. Pandala to give us the update.
President Joseph E. Estrada initiated the enactment of the following law.
President Joseph E. Estrada, 1998-2000. Era para sa mahirap. This was the battle cry that endeared President Joseph Estrada and made him very popular during the 1998 presidential election. President Joseph E. Estrada initiated the enactment of the following law. Executive Order Number 151, September 1999. Farmers Trust Fund allowed the voluntary consolidation of small farm operation into medium and large-scale integrated enterprise that can access long-term capital. During his administration, President Estrada launched the Magkabalikat para sa Kaunlarang Agraryo or Magkasaka that are forged into joint ventures with private investors into agrarian sector to make FBs competitive. However, the Estrada administration was short-lived. The masses who put into his office demanded his ouster.
Thank you, Pandalat. And now for another latest news. Agrarian reform after World War II.
President Rojas signed into law RA 34 established 70 to 30 sharing arrangements, regulating share tenancy contracts. Land Settlement and Development Corporation, LESDECO, under President Quirino was transformed into National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration or NARA. During President Magsaysay to accelerate resettlement program, President Magsaysay RA 1199 Agricultural Tenancy Act protects tenural rights and enforce tenancy practices. To tell you another story, Makapagal Agrarian Reform and President Benigno Aquino III.
President Macapagal Agrarian Reform, RA number 3844, Agricultural Land Reform Code during President Macapagal's term. Abolished share tenancy. Prescribed a program to convert tenant farmers to leases and later owner cultivators. Aim to free tenants from tenancy. Emphasize owner cultivatorship and farmer independence, equality, productivity improvement, and public land distribution. President Benigno Aquino III vowed during his 2012 State of the Nation address that the would complete before the end of his term the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program or CARP. The centerpiece program of the administration of his mother, President Corazon Aquino, the younger Aquino distributed their family-owned Hacienda Luisita and Tarlac. Apart from the said term slots, he also promised to complete the distribution of privately owned lands of productive agricultural status and the country that have escaped the coverage of the program.
Let's keep the conversation running and more story to reveal once. We'll be right back.
And we are back for another story to reveal. President Marcos' agrarian reform and President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Here is Jonathan Dalimbang to tell us about it.
We all know that the President Rodrigo Duterte is very different. One of his advocacy is to build those transportation highway as well as the bridges. Under his leadership, the President wants to pursue an aggressive land reform program that would help alleviate the life of poor farmers by prioritizing the provisions of support service alongside land distributions.
70% of the poverty nandoon sa agricultural sector. They don't own a land. The land reform was a farce, not because it was not given, for indeed there was really a ceremony to do that, but the problem again is that
the President directed the DAR to launch the second phase of agrarian reform where landless farmers would be awarded with undistributed lands under the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. The President also placed 400 hectares of agricultural lands and Boracay under CARP.
President Corazon C. Aquino. Here is Ms. Garciano for the details.
The state shall promote comprehensive rural development and agrarian reform, says Section 21 of Article 2 of 1987 Constitution, which was passed by Filipino people under President Corazon C. Aquino's administration. These are the following laws that were signed by President Corazon C. Aquino. Republic Act No. 6657, 1988, Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, an act which became effective on June 15, 1988, and instituted a comprehensive agrarian reform program to promote social justice and industrialization. This law is still the one being implemented at present. Executive Order No. 228, 1987, declared full ownership to qualified farmer beneficiaries covered by PD 27. It also determined the value of remaining unvalued rice and corn lands subject of PD 27 and provided for the manner of payment by the FBs and mode of compensation to landowners. Proclamation Number 131, 1987, instituted the CARP or CARP as a major program of the government. It provided for a special fund known as the Agrarian Reform Fund, with an initial amount of 50 billion pesos to cover the estimated cost of the program from 1987 to 1992. Executive Order No. 405, 1990, vested in the Land Bank of the Philippines the responsibility to determine land valuation and compensation for all lands covered by CARP or CARP. This is Iana Garciano.
For the last story to reveal, what is CARP or Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program? What is CARP or Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program? CARP or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program is simply the redistribution of public and private agricultural lands to farmers and farm workers who are landless regardless of tenurial arrangements. It is the centerpiece of program of President Corazon C. Aquino, which stands until today. It was put into law on June 10, 1998 through Republic Act 6657. The law aims to promote social justice and industrialization. The law is driven by the overall principles of promoting social justice, equitable distribution and ownership of land, and greater productivity of agricultural lands. The government sees that such law will promote higher incomes and increase the chances of farmer beneficiary to be non-poor. The 1998 Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, CARL, broadened the scope of a rural land reform by including private agricultural lands irrespective of crops and tenure arrangements. It also provides to support services agrarian reform beneficiaries like infrastructure, capability building, and credit marketing assistance.
Ready your gift because we now have 36 days before Christmas.
And that's the latest news and updates of the day.
This is One News Center.
Your time
Your news. I am Hamad Bukalam.
and Alea Mulao leaving you with a saying,
In the age of information, ignorance is a choice. And keep on striving for a better La Islas Pilipinas.